A note of warning. This podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast, bringing you high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm Billy Jensen. This is Owen Michael.
Hello.
Today is September 19th, 2019, and our guest is journalist and true crime writer Shanna Hogan, joining us from over the phone from beautiful Phoenix, Arizona.
Hello, Shanna.
Hi, Shanna. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm here with my 3-month-old baby who's making his podcast debut, Xander.
Okay.
And so I apologize in advance if you hear a little baby noise in the background.
Not at all. What's his name?
Xander.
Xander. Welcome, Xander.
Welcome, Xander. Okay.
Thank you.
So your latest book was released in February, and I know that because we were on 3 book panels together at the Tucson Book Fair. And it's called Secrets of a Marine's Wife, A True Story of Marriage, Obsession, and Murder. And it's about a very captivating case about Erin Corwin. And why don't you talk us through the case a little bit, because it was one of those cases that really stuck with a lot of people that remembered hearing about it.
Yeah, Erin Corwin was a small-town girl from Tennessee who moved to 29 Palms, California with her husband, who was a Marine, when he joined the Marines. And they were living on the Marine base when she struck up an affair with her next-door neighbor, who was a little bit older, 26-year-old Marine who was about to get out of the military. And he was married with a 6-year-old daughter. And everyone in the apartment complex that they lived in found out about the affair, and it ended abruptly. And then in August, she went missing from the Marine base. A long, intense search ensued, and 6 weeks later, she was found at the bottom of the mine shaft. Her husband was immediately suspected, and as they investigated, it turned out that it was the guy she was having an affair with. His name was Chris Lee, and he had an affinity for guns and talked about wanting to kill people, and he later testified on the stand that he did, in fact, do it, dispose of her body in the mine shaft, but tried to get off on a lesser charge. So he was convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
He was a Marine, and the husband was a Marine. Is that right?
Yes. They lived right next door to each other on the Marine base.
Wow.
Out in 29 Palms, which is out by Palm Springs, out here in Southern California.
Yeah. And you've written books on Marjorie Orban, Martin McNeil, and Jodi Arias.
Yes, the Jodi Arias one is the most popular case and became a New York Times bestseller. But, they're all interesting, delving into these cases. As you know, I feel like you can't really accurately write about a story and tell the entire story except for the form of a book. With a crime case, and cover the trial and cover all the twists and turns, the backgrounds of the characters. So I really love doing that, spending like a year on a case and just really, writing about everything that happened and all the characters that come into play.
And what are you working on right now?
Yeah, I took on another book assignment from my publisher. It's a case in New Jersey about a man named Paul Canero, who he had a business with his brother. He kind of, even though he was the older brother, he grew up in his younger brother's shadow. The younger brother, Keith Canero, was more successful, started the business and owned a better house, went to an Ivy League school, and brought his brother along as he grew more successful in his business. And then Paul started embezzling from the business. And one day, right before Thanksgiving of last year, Keith was found dead outside of his burned out home, and inside his entire family was found murdered. And shortly after that, there was a fire at Paul's house. And so what police later determined was that Paul killed his brother and his brother's entire family and set his own house on fire to make it look like they were both being targeted by like the mafia or something. And he was quickly arrested, and he is yet to go on trial. So I'm going to follow that case when it goes on trial, and that will be the subject of my next book.
Shanna, you have a journalism background, right? Is that kind of what led you into true crime coverage?
Yes, I worked at newspapers, at a daily newspaper for several years, and then I went on to work for a monthly covering big stories and writing in long form format, and really enjoyed that, and started writing about local cases. I wrote about Jodi Arias and Marjorie Orban and realized I wanted to turn those into books. And so from there, I kind of fell into writing true crime.
I'm not too familiar with the Marjorie Orban story. I'm going to have to look that one up, and I'll check out your book on that one in particular.
Yeah.
But you're in the right place as far as
Yes.
true crime coverage here.
And we'd love to get your thoughts on the cases this week. And our cases this week include a Florida man is arrested after his missing wife's body is found in his van, and 4 kids are found dead in the nearby woods. A young Ohio woman gets probation for burying her dead newborn infant in her parents' backyard. A little boy is found sleeping on an upstate New York porch a mile away from a burned-out car believed to contain the bodies of his missing parents. But first, adoptive parents are accused in a strange adoption case out of Indiana. Owen, what's going on out there in Indiana?
Yes, this story is kind of wild. It's got a lot of twists and turns. This concerns a story of a family in Indiana. So Michael Barnett and Christine Barnett, they are accused of adopting a child years ago and then abandoning that child in Indiana and leaving her behind and moving to Canada. This happened in 2013. They're also accused of officially changing this adopted girl's age from 8 years old to 11 years old to 22 years old within 2 years, between 2010 and 2012. Some unusual activity there. So these two parents, it's Michael Barnett and Christine Barnett, they're accused of leaving this child that they adopted alone in an apartment in Lafayette, Indiana, which is just outside of Indianapolis. It's northwest. It's home to Purdue University. They left this adopted girl in this apartment, moved their 3 biological sons and themselves to Canada, and then they stopped paying Indiana rent, which sounds like a strange story to begin with. But there's more. This girl, who we're not identifying since we can't determine her age and we don't have a photo of her, she had arrived in the United States from Ukraine in 2008 as part of an adoption program. She was adopted in November 2010 by the Barnetts. She has a form of dwarfism called spondyloepiphyseal, if you will. It's a mouthful. It's basically skeletal abnormalities. It makes her appear... it's tough to determine what her age would be. So the parents report, NBC's reporting that the parents, they're now divorced. They believe that they were scammed. They said they believe that the girl was between 18 and 22 years old when she was adopted. They were led to believe that they were adopting a child. However, a doctor's examination of this girl in 2010, he estimated this girl to be about 8 years old. 2 years later, in 2012, hospital examination of the girl's skeleton, they said that she was probably 11 years old. Prosecutors say that the girl was about 12 or 13 when the family moved to Canada. This girl has now disappeared. Can't find where she is. The couple, though, who's now divorced, they're charged with felony neglect of a dependent in Tippecanoe County. That's the Indiana location. Both parents have since surrendered to authorities. It's unclear how old this daughter is. If the original assessment is correct, she's about 17 or 18 now. She's dropped out of school. Sheriff's investigators got into this case because apparently this girl had presented herself to another set of parents and told them that she was a child, which she, by all accounts, does not seem to be. So there's all kinds of shadiness. This does remind me a little bit of a case. Billy, do you remember this one? Shanna, you may as well. There was a guy in Pennsylvania who was also, he was from Eastern Bloc country. He was 22 and he was posing as basically a 16-year-old student.
Yes, he was in high school.
That's right. And he eventually got busted and he went to jail and they tried to prosecute his parents. I haven't looked that case up recently, but everybody in this case seems to sort of be unhappy. These parents feel like they got scammed. Yeah. Incidentally, they have 3 other kids. The first kid actually was studying in college. He's like a genius physics prodigy.
He went 12 years old and went to Indiana University.
Yeah, he was studying at 12 years old. They basically moved to Canada to go to a specific physics school for this kid, and that's why they decided to leave this daughter, this adopted daughter. It's a strange case. Am I leaving any details out here, gang?
I think that's...
The parents also accused the girl of being a sociopath and a psychopath.
This is true. You never want to hear that from your parents. But so it definitely seems like there's more details to this case. We'd like to hear more about. I'm sure that they feel like they are kind of on the hook for this scam here. It sounded like it was just a quick abandonment type story, but there's all sorts of twists and turns here. So we will bring you more as soon as we know more about this case.
Yeah. Now we're going to go to Buffalo, New York, a place called Cheektowaga. And police call this a very, very complicated case. The Black Rock neighborhood, a little boy 3 years old was found sleeping in a cardboard box left on a porch for cats to sleep in. About Monday morning at 8 a.m., he was only wearing a pull-up diaper. Later Monday, a mile away, a car was found in a secluded parking lot behind a storage unit business, and it had been burnt out. And WIVB TV reports say that the police said that the fire damage obliterated any possible evidence so far. The investigators think that the fire started around 3 a.m. the night before. The car was found about 6 p.m., so it burnt itself out. So that means it just, when you got a fire that hot, it's just going to keep going. But human remains were found. The car was so badly burned, the make and model were not immediately identifiable, which means that's rough.
Yeah, I couldn't find a picture of this thing just yet, but you've seen car fires before. You can generally tell what kind of a frame or something like that, but when it's this bad. However, it was enough to find human remains inside.
A woman who found the toddler, who was identified as Nolvin, repeatedly referenced a burning car. According to WIVB TV. He said the car's on fire. That's all he kept saying, the car's on fire. This is so sad. His parents are missing, along with a third person, a Florida family friend who was traveling with them. The boy's grandmother says the three of them were in Buffalo to visit for a getaway. The missing parents are Nicole Merced, 24 years old, Miguel Valentine, 31 years old. And the boy's grandmother says she talked to them on Sunday. There's no official link between the boy in the car nor the missing trio from Florida. Really, the big link is, the little boy, sleeping in this box.
Yeah, there's some coincidences here. That,
and the parents' two other children are safe back in Florida. So, we're going to keep you up to date on this story as it develops. But
I mean, imagine the scene. This is a mile away. So how did the kid, in wearing only a diaper, make it from this spot where the car was found? Did somebody
pick him up?
Was it the friend? Was it the parents?
Yep.
Whoever, if there was a crime here, did they drop the kid off? Did the kid wander away? I don't know. Shanna, what did you think when you encountered this story?
That was my thought too. I just imagine this 3-year-old, wandering alone in a diaper, practically maybe a mile, just how sad that detail of the story is, and that it might be his parents.
I mean, it's difficult to think of a 3-year-old, thank goodness it's not the winter, but so in the summertime you could see him, braving the elements, but a mile is a pretty decent distance. And then also the kids, we have a photo up here, and of course we can describe this for our listeners. It's basically just a cardboard box with a kind of a towel at the base of it. Apparently they were cat lovers and letting cats stay out there, and that's what this was intended for. So either somebody saw this and said that's a good spot to leave the kid, or the kid naturally found sort of a warm, soft place to live. We don't know much about the person's house other than they seem to be completely unaffiliated with the family or anything else. That's the biggest mystery to me, is what happened. How did this kid get over there? Did somebody drop him off? It really seems unlikely that a kid would have wandered a mile, especially if any storage unit place that you've been by is usually in kind of an industrial area, industrial neighborhood. So it's not exactly, walking by white picket fences and going through yards and things like that.
I can't imagine the homeowners opening their front door and seeing a baby in a box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, the stork visiting.
Yeah.
And not to make light of it, they haven't confirmed any of the identities of the people found in there, but it sounds like the grandmother, she's applying to adopt the kid. It seems that they need to officialize all the details, but it seems that it's clear that this kid's parents are not with us anymore. I can't imagine that they would leave and go on the run or whatever else. You could think of all sorts of possibilities, but glad the kid's okay.
Yes, definitely. Well, now we've got a story out of Florida. Casey Jones, 32 years old, mother of 4, is missing from Marion County, Florida. the Ocala metro area of Florida, which is 80 miles northwest of Orlando. Michael Jones Jr., 38 years old, crashed a van Sunday night, September 15th in Hickox, Georgia. It was a rural county north of the Florida-Georgia line, 65 miles north of Jacksonville. CNN reports a neighbor ran over to help and said there was an overpowering smell coming from the van. Inside the van was Casey Jones's body. And on Monday, her 4 children, ages 10, 5, 2, and 1, were found dead and buried in the woods about 30 miles away. The older 2 children were from a previous marriage. Michael Jones, father of the youngest 2, Jones led deputies to the location, and we're still waiting for the official confirmation of the identities. Just, again, awful, awful, awful story.
Yes, it's true. When they pulled him over, he basically self-implicated. He basically confessed, and he said, "You may want to put me in handcuffs. Go ahead and arrest me. My wife's body is in the back." That's according to reports from the scene, including USA Today is reporting that, CNN. They think that Michael Jones killed his family as many as 6 weeks ago and stored them in the house, maybe moved their bodies to the van, then drove to Georgia to dispose of them. That's conjecture, but that's what the police are saying. The Casey Jones's mother, the missing mom here, her mother hadn't heard from the family for a couple of weeks. When one of the boys' birthdays happened, you know how you go on Facebook, you put a big thing, especially for little kids.
Sure,
Shanna, I'm not sure if that's your first or
Yes.
I don't have any, but I imagine that I'd be pretty excited about birthdays and big events like that, and it's perfectly what Facebook is for, and for the family and all the rest. When one of these, I think it was the 10-year-olds, I'm not confirmed on that, but when one of the boys' birthdays happened, there was no anything. There's no social presence. There's nothing going on. So that's when Grandma got really scared and involved and called for a welfare check. And the deputy went over there and found that the place had been, looked like it had been abandoned for weeks, and said that there was an overpowering smell of decomposition coming from the place, which is never a good indication.
There's a really, this isn't, obviously this is a horrific case, a family annihilator as they're called in the business. But Shanna, what do you make of not burying the mother with the children?
Yeah, and the fact that he also was able to drive around with that smell. Apparently, the first witness who came up to the car said it was this overpowering smell too, and like that it just, a cloud of that noxious odor formed around the car like right away. And he was just driving around with that, breathing that in for, who knows how long. It makes you wonder, is he, the type that had some sort of attachment to his wife's body? Did he want to do something else to her? What was the deal? Why was he trying to keep her away from her children? Yeah,
just the sheer logistics of this amount of, that's unnatural. The decomposition, that kind of smell, it's a horrifying smell.
I've never smelt it, thankfully, but enough crime writing, everyone who's described to me what it smells like, you don't want to smell it.
And it's unmistakable what it is, apparently, reportedly. Me as well. But that's a great point, Billy. Whether he had some sort of sentimental attachment and was mad at the kids or some kind of mental imbalance. We did have a story basically 2 or 3 months ago, which wrapped up a similar case where a guy who basically was mad at his wife. He kidnapped his 5 kids. He killed them, and he drove around with their bodies for at least 9 days through South Carolina in the rural areas. He eventually dumped their bodies in a kind of a rural fire road in a forest, and they had been they basically were found in garbage bags and had been disturbed by animals. So we'll leave it at that. But it's a similar thing. This guy got the death penalty. This is Timothy Jones Jr., which, by the way, is not any relation to Michael Jones Jr. It just happens to be that common name Jones. His wife, during the penalty phase of the trial, urged the judge not to give the death penalty, but he got it, and he got the death penalty, but she sort of forgave him for that. But obviously there's some pathology here about, just making the kids pay, or there's a whole entire psychiatric profile of why and how, and some sort of dissociative break to be able to, how could anybody do that? But we will, of course, on truecrimedaily.com give you more details. We're following that closely.
More on that. Now we've got a case that was probably the biggest case in terms of a court case this past week. It was Brooke Richardson in Ohio. You might not remember the name Brooke Richardson, but you remember what they were calling her over and over and over again in the media, which was cheerleader. Cheerleader buried a baby in the backyard. And this is the news that happened. Her name was Brooke Skylar Richardson. She was 20 years old. She was sentenced last week in Warren County, Ohio, just northeast of Cincinnati. She was found guilty of abuse of a corpse. She was found not guilty of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. And there has been a lot of talk on the true crime message boards about this one.
It's true. Shanna, did you read up on this one? Are you familiar with that
I've
one?
been following this case for a while.
It does. Absolutely. It does sort of have all the elements here. You've got the cheerleader. You've got a blonde white girl in Cincinnati. It's a media friendly. I shouldn't say friendly, but it's a media ready story. It's got all these elements. Basically, she is accused. Brooke Skylar Richardson. She was accused of giving birth in her bathroom in May 2017 at home, at her parents' house. She then buried the child's body in the backyard. She claimed that the child was stillborn, and there's some dispute on that. The baby wasn't found for about 2 months after she had been allegedly buried, and she had insisted that there was basically a forensics examiner determined that the baby had basically burn marks or had been burned at some point. Brooke Richardson, she repeatedly, I read somewhere, as many as 15 times had repeatedly denied that she had tried to burn the baby or cremate the baby during an interrogation with police, but then eventually admitted that she did try to burn the baby before burying the child. Basically, this came to light because a doctor had given her a pregnancy test, and when she returned months later, she had lost a bunch of weight, and there was no baby, obviously, and she confessed to this doctor and said that the baby was stillborn and that she had buried it in the backyard. We have heard of other stories like this across the country in history here.
What I found interesting,
go ahead.
What I found interesting about it is that she only had that examination where she found out she was pregnant 11 days before she actually had the baby. And she also went to prom at some point or some sort of dance, and they show her a picture of her, and she could pass for not pregnant. As someone who just had a baby, that was crazy to me. But there are, obviously women who don't know they're pregnant for the 9 months. You see those shows all the time. I didn't know I was pregnant. So the timeline is kind of interesting here. And I think that might have gone into play of why the jury came back with the not guilty verdict, because she, just found out she was pregnant and didn't tell anyone, but it wasn't a long period of time where she was hiding this.
Yeah. So the baby's dad said that she had never told him that she was pregnant. Apparently they'd gotten together 2 times maybe. She had a new boyfriend. Some of the details that were a little sideways that came out during the trial, though, CNN reports that hours after she gave birth, she had texted her mom a picture of her at the gym, basically the next day, saying, quotes, "My belly is back, OMG, I'm never, ever, ever, ever letting it get like this again." So, Shanna, I hadn't actually seen the photo that you're referencing, but it sounds like there's some presence of mind there after this happened. And here's what she told the judge by way of apology, which I'm going to prejudice you a little bit here and say that I found this a little bit insincere, but here's what she said. "I just wanted to say how sorry I was. I can sometimes be selfish, but I would like to think that I've become better in the knowledge that I've upset everyone and hurt so many people with what I've done." Kind
of a non-apology.
Yeah, and look,
I'm sorry if I upset you.
I was a kid. I remember, you don't get consequences of your actions. You're not good at apologizing or making recompense and things like that. But yes, that was very insincere. And there's the qualifier if you were offended, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I can sometimes be. I'll give it to you that I'm a little selfish, but I just want to say how sorry I was. Little gives like that. I mean, I'm not trying to crucify her on that. Where you're in the heat of the moment talking to the judge, but it was not particularly convincing. So she basically served 7 days in the lead up to the trial 2 years ago. She was sentenced this Friday. She was given credit for time served for those 7 days. She's basically given 3 years probation court supervision. Of course, if she violates any terms of the supervision, she could face up to a year in jail. She could also get a $2,500 fine, but she wasn't given a fine. Prosecutors did ask for 6 months in jail. She did not have a prior criminal record, but the judge, as we said, gave her probation. So comparatively, I don't have a list of other cases that are similar, but this one does seem, when you weigh it against other similar types of cases, it seems like, in judging by our comments and message boards and things like that, maybe there was a little light in the sentencing here.
A little leniency, as they call that.
It's our speculative opinion and all the rest, but you can look up the story and see for yourself.
Yeah. So, Owen, you were talking about comments.
I was
and,
indeed.
We get a lot of comments.
I have read some of those comments.
Yes, we do.
Shanna, you should check them out on Facebook. Why on Facebook, Bill?
Because we have the largest Facebook true crime page in the world. I shouldn't really say that because I'm not quite sure if there is one. It's probably not one in China because they're not allowed to talk about stuff. So
I don't know if true crime, the genre, has quite gotten over there yet. But
I don't think so.
Commenters, please weigh in and let us know if we're lacking there.
And one of the things that China doesn't have Florida. And our first story comes from Florida. The headline: Florida couple allegedly caught having sex in patrol car after DUI arrest. While I was outside of my patrol vehicle, Megan and Erin took their clothes off and started to have sex, the report reads. When I opened up the door to stop them, Erin was naked and Megan had her pants down. And these were our comments. Darren D. said, wait, what? While handcuffed in the back seat? These two need to be in the circus.
A little contortionism there.
Yes. Vivian B. said, all I can think of is Lysol.
Although, if you've ever been in the back of a patrol car, I'm sure you haven't. I could probably think of a few people that have. It's not the most sanitary place, but Lysol is a good
You don't
way to
necessarily want to use Lysol, though, because I think it might dry up the leather. I'm just going to say that right now, if it is leather. And Rose E. said they check that off the bucket list, I guess. So
that is... Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be famous, even if it's just online famous, I could think of worse ways to achieve some notoriety there.
Yes.
Shanna, watch out.
So
Florida, Arizona can be suspiciously similar sometimes to Florida. It's just drier.
From that one, we get a little bit darker. Milwaukee man gets 2.5 years probation for hidden camera in women's restroom. He was accused of installing a hidden camera inside a women's restroom at a car dealership. A detective, quote, observed dozens of video clips of individuals. The device also included a clip that shows him placing the portable device in the women's bathroom paper towel dispenser. There's always that. They always like this, like they turn it on first, and then they look at it, and so is this working? And you see their faces right there.
It's always an unpleasant, in my experience. I don't like going to car dealerships, whether used or new. It's my particular thing. I don't particularly like that. But then on top of that, I got to go get the manager so we can run these numbers here. Why don't you go in the bathroom, wash up, and
And speaking of leniency, a lot of people were upset at this leniency. Naleli C. said, wow, shows how little they care for women's rights. Just probation for spying on women in the privacy of a restroom? Just wow. Sean H. agreed and said he should have gotten 10 years in prison. And Sally P. said, how come men never get punished for doing something sexual? We need more women as judges.
I think that's debatable, but I mean, not the judge. I could definitely see we need more female judges, but I'm not entirely sold on whether men don't ever get punished for something sexual. I think that's
well, we also have a guy that is in the Supreme Court. So
Please direct your comments to my left.
And the last one is 2 Amish men flee from deputies after being spotted drinking while driving a buggy.
Ohio.
Yes. According to this report, he saw 2 Amish men drinking inside the buggy, and on top of the vehicle was a 12-pack of beer. He also spotted something unusual for an Amish buggy, a stereo system with large speakers.
I mean, this thing is tricked out.
And that's an old stereo system, too.
Yeah, that's like a hand-built one.
Yeah,
These are cool. It's the kind of that you get out of the van, and when they pull up in the parking lot. Hey, man, I got these speakers in the van. I got some overhead. The boss is gonna. It's that kind of old school speaker.
So Lynette W. said, this is common practice where I live. If you want to have a good old time party like the Amish, a few of them even have those fancy undercarriage lights. Darlene C. said, just how desperate are police these days? Now, if the horse was boozing it up, I'd understand. LOL. And the last one here, which I will read, is from Chris K. You know, horses are a lot more responsible than cars and some buggy owners.
The cop that they interviewed for this, and I believe this was WJW and TV in Cleveland, said that basically Amish horses or horses kept by the Amish, they know where they're going. The horse basically took off running and went home. So they haven't caught the perpetrators here, but they do basically know where this buggy comes from because, horses, it's like a dog. They know where to go. So it's only a matter of time before we get to the bottom of these Amish criminals.
By the way, also, I found it interesting that the 12-pack that they had was Michelob Ultra, trying to keep the carbs down.
Well, very...
Are Amish even allowed to drink?
Well, so there's this thing called Rumspringa, and I think our commenters may want to weigh in on this one as well. There's a great documentary out there called The Devil's something or other.
But if you're in Rumspringa, you're supposed to be getting it all out of your system.
Right.
You go for Michelob Ultra. Oh, and you're a beer guy. I consider myself somewhat of a beer guy. You don't want to go with that. Life's too short.
Like in high school, I was, I took whatever I could get. So if you're stealing it, it was like Natural Light or Hams or something like that, or Keystone or whatever it is.
Yeah, they're in Ohio, right near Pennsylvania. I'm sure they have Yingling, which is the best cheap beer out there. By the way,
I'll leave that debate neither here nor there. But I agree. I mean, for our listeners, this thing is pretty tricked out. I kind of want to ride around in one of these. I kind of like to live someplace where I could get around by horse and buggy, and I'd probably be hanging around with these fellows. Well, but that says more about me than it does anything else.
It certainly does. So thank you, Shanna Hogan, for being with us this week. We're glad to have you anytime. Again, the name of the book is Secrets of a Marine's Wife, a true story of marriage, obsession, and murder.
Thanks for having me. You guys are hilarious.
Yes, and we'll have a link to buy the book in the credits where people can find out more about you. That's our show. Thanks for tuning in. Find us every week on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify. Leave us comments, and you can call us at 888-548-9758, and we might run you and what you tell us on the air in the future. So until next week,
don't do crimes.